What's up, guys? This is Tom for GTO Wizard. In the spirit of Halloween, we've prepared some spooky GTO analysis for you. We're going to review two hands that put us in some scary spots, followed by an in-depth look at the GTO strategy behind them. Let's jump right in. This first hand starts off with Queen 2 suited in the big blind. Cutoff opens, and we call. Flop comes 4-4 deuce rainbow. Cutoff bets third pot, and we call. The turn Queen of Hearts upgrades our 2 pair to a 3 pair, which is really just a queen with no kicker. And the cutoff bets 75% pot. We make the call. The turn Jack of Hearts completes the backdoor flush draw. And they shove over 4 times the pot. What are we supposed to do here? Hearts beat us, boats beat us, trips beat us, heck, even a better queen beats us. And yet, we should make this call. Why is that? Let's take a look at the GTO analysis. So cutoff opens, call in the big blind with this range. Flop comes 4-4 deuce rainbow. And this is an interesting texture. I think most players would categorize this as quite a dry flop. And that's because everything missed, right? If we take a look at the ranges tab, we can compare the hands breakdown between both ranges. We can see that over 80% of both ranges are just overcards. It's just air, trash. However, because there's no high cards on the board, all of these overcards are competing to outdraw each other. And this actually makes this type of texture very dynamic. Now we notice there's a small donking range here, about 13%. What's going on with that? Let's go look at the equity buckets, and I want to observe the nut advantage. I'm going to look at this equity distribution graph. Now, we have a small nut advantage near the top, and this is mostly owing to the fact that we have more trips. We defend with more 4x than they open in the cutoff. However, they have a big range advantage throughout, and that's simply because their overcards are stronger than our overcards. So we check, and cutoff is not range betting here, but they bet small. And betting small is quite common in paired boards and single raise pots. The reason for that is they don't need a big bet to target our air. Right? They're not trying to fold us off a mate hand here. They're targeting king high. They're targeting 9-7 suited, queen 10 off type of stuff. What stands out to me is just how much it's check raising here, over 20% of the time. And that's owing to this dynamic board texture. You can see even queen 2 does play as a raise quite frequently. In general, you want to be raising with hands that have good backdoor potential, such as 3x or 5x, backdoor flush draw, backdoor straight draw, gut shots, hands like that. So we call and turn a Queen of Hearts. Now the Queen of Hearts, very sad card for us. Right? We're not really defending that many queens. We even raise some of them flop. If we take a look at the turn reports, what I'm going to do here is we're going to sort all the possible turn cards by EV. We can see the top here, this is our EV. Hence the Queen's not a great turn card for us, but it's an excellent turn card for the cutoff. Why is that? Well, that's because the cutoff is betting lots of Queen X, whereas we're not calling that much Queen X. In fact, we'd much rather have seen an ace because we actually have an advantage in the ace cards. So Queen of Hearts, we're going to range check this, and cutoff splits their strategy. They've got anywhere between a block bet and an overbet in this spot, many different viable options. Now the 75% is on the more polarized side of what they can do. They're mainly doing this with stuff like top pair, some over pairs, various draws, flush draws, gut shots, and such. But when they bet 75, we can already see that we're put in a pretty tough spot. Most of our range is getting close to indifferent here. You can see the polarization in that they have all these strong hands, weaker hands, whereas we have more bluff catchers. Queen 2, again, it does have the option to raise here, but most of the range prefers a call when they polarize like this. So we call, see a Jack of Hearts river. The Jack of Hearts is, that's an interesting river because what it does is it completes all the backdoor flush draws, which evens out the advantages a bit. We can see here, it's not really clear who has the advantage on this river. I mean, we have more bluff catchers near the bottom. That's because they polarized. They have a small nut advantage. However, if we take a look at the hands breakdown, they have more boats, quads. We have more flushes. What this means is that their strongest value can polarize over our strongest value. And that's why, once we check, they have a shoving range here. This is what enables them to get away with this massive size. We can see the breakdown here, about 22% boats, 30% flushes. A lot of the rest of it is just air. Very polarizing. So when they shove, we're not happy, right? If we take a look here, I'm going to change this over to ranges again, and just pay attention to this equity distribution. Everything along this line here is very close to indifferent. You need about 44, 45% to call this massive overbet, and most of our range sits right on that line. Flushes, not too happy. Trips, very sad. Top pair, not doing great, right? In fact, even our ace 10, even the nut flush is mixing in folds here. The second nut flush, very close to a pure fold. Our range is not happy. But there does seem to be one or two combos that are calling in full that aren't the nuts. One of them is Queen Deuce suited. That's pretty wild. I think the more advanced players will note that we have good blockers. But let's take a look at that. Why does Queen 2 have good blockers here? We have to jump back to cutoff's shoving range. What I'm going to do is I'm going to filter. I just want to look at what they're shoving with. I'm going to change this to range just to make it a little easier to see. What I'm going to do is I'm going to apply these equity bucket filters, and I want to see what their value range is. So we can see here that they're shoving with 2s, 4s, jacks, queens, and the nut flush for value. And Queen 2 blocks a pretty big chunk of that value range, right? We block queens and 2s. What about their bluffs? What about their worst hands? Well, I mean, they're bluffing with ace X, king X offsuit with heart blockers, some other king X suited. But we'll note that queen and 2 do not interact with this bluffing range at all. So what that tells us is we block actually a huge portion of their value and unblock all of their bluffs. For that reason, Queen 2 is going to have higher equity than most of the rest of our range. Like, let's take a look. The nut flush, 44%. What about trips? How's 6-4 doing? About 44%. Queen 2, on the other hand, 46%. That's the power of blockers. We can see it's one of our few plus EV calls. Very scary spot. Obviously, a great call if anyone could find it. All right, let's take a look at the next hand. In this next hand, we have 5-2 of clubs in the big blind. The small blind opens and we call. Flop comes 8-5-3 rainbow. Okay, not a bad flop for us. We've got second pair, some good backdoors, and they've bet 3 times the pot. What? Okay, we call. All right, 4 of diamonds, puts a few straights out there. We turned an open-ender. There's some good flush draws, and they've shoved, Wow. What do we do in this spot? Got an open-ender, got a pair. Do we make this call? Yes. Why is that? Let's take a look at the GTO analysis. Now, most people don't give their solvers 300% pot overbets, so I've switched to the complex solutions, which have many more sizes. Small blind opens, big blind calls, and we get 8-5-3 rainbow. Surprisingly, this massive overbet is actually the preferred size. I'm just going to graph that to make it easier to see. Wow. Okay, that's very strange. Let's take a look at the ranges and compare. We can see that small blind does have the nut advantage, 14 to 2.5, but these nutted hands are all quite vulnerable. Over pairs, 8x. these hands can be outdrawn quite easily. Now, in order to have a massive overbet, your opponent can't have too many made-nutted hands. And if we just filter by 2-pair plus, we can see that only about 2% of each range is 2-pair plus. Okay, what if they just bet a normal size? What if they just bet something like 1/3? What are we doing if they just bet something human? Well, we're not folding. MDF would have us fold something like 22% versus this size. We're massively underfolding. And the reason is everything somewhat connects with this board. Everything is backdoor straight or a backdoor flush or overcards, pair plus draw. In fact, it doesn't even matter what size you pick. We are overcalling this board against every size. Like 115, we should be folding something like a little over half the time. We're overcalling 10%. That's true regardless of what size you pick. In fact, you take a look at the reports and say, I don't know, I'll pick 38 this time. What is the least folded flop? It's 853, right? If we pick some random 63%, what's the least folded flop? One of the least folded flops out of 1755. So what do you do when you have a bunch of vulnerable value hands and your opponent is just going to overcall with a ton of backdoor equity against you? Well, you size up. And apparently you size up a lot. So they make it 300%. Okay, what are we doing against this size? I always think it's useful to find thresholds in these situations. What hands are we folding? We can see that even some top pair is folding here. So King 8, Queen 8, 10 8, 9 8 off. These hands are all folding. And the reason is that, for one thing, these hands are already dominated by their Ace 8, which is a big part of the value range. The other thing is these hands can't really outdraw the value range as effectively. But a hand like 5-2, particularly 5-2 with a backdoor flush draw, this hand has a lot of backdoor equity, a lot of routes to outdraw 9s plus and Ace 8. We can hit a 5, we can hit a 2, we can hit a backdoor heart, backdoor club, we can hit Ace, a 6, 4, tons of different ways we can make a draw here on the turn. And that's important when your opponent is polarizing this hard. It's not about raw hand strength, it's about how can I outdraw their value range. So similarly, you'll see 6s and 7s have very few outs comparatively. So even though they're technically a stronger hand, they're folding here. Okay, you'll notice we don't have any raises here. So we make the call. 4 of diamonds. So we turn a 4 of diamonds, and at this point, the small blind has a decision to make. Do they want to give up? Do they want to drag this out to the river using a smaller size? Or do they just want to get the chips in now? And a portion of their range just wants the shove. That's mainly going to be their overpairs, and they're balancing that with some gut shots and open-enders. So they ship it. Action's on us. What are we calling with here? Well, we're giving up with, some 9s are giving up. 8x is giving up. A lot of our second and third pairs giving up. Even hands like Jack 3 of diamonds is giving up. 5 deuce. 5 deuce is calling. And this is mainly due to the fact that you don't block too many of their bluffs and that your outs are clean, right? Any deuce, 5, ace, or 6 will allow us to outdraw their value range. And when you're in these very polarized spots, that's what's important. It's not about raw hand strength. It's not about I have a combo draw, so I call. It's about I need to be able to outdraw their value, unblock their bluffs. And that's what gives this hand enough equity to call. You can see we have 40% here, whereas a hand like King 3 of diamonds only has 37, Queen 8 off, only 35, 38. So this is one of the few plus EV bluff catchers we actually have in our range. All right, that's it for the video, guys. Feel free to comment if you want to discuss the theory. Join our Discord. We'd be happy to talk more about it with you there. Leave a like, subscribe, and let us know what you think.